Welcome back to Ralph's Sort of True Stories. We have another segment here. We're going to talk about relationships and how they kind of change over time. And the first story I want to tell you about is a guy's coming home. He's drunk and he's weaving. And the cop stops him. And the cop pulls him over and says, "Sir, what the heck are you doing out here at 3 o'clock in the morning?" And he says, "Well, officer, I'm actually on my way to a lecture about the evils of drinking." And he says, "Well, who in the heck would be given a lecture at 3 o'clock in the morning on the evils of drinking?" He said, "That, sir, would be my wife." So it sounds like that guy's in trouble when he gets home. Okay, another story that involves a cop. Seems that this guy's wife was in a terrible accident. Her car had gotten hit by a truck and she was somewhat disfigured and also unfortunately deceased. So the cops go to the address that's on the driver's license and knock on the door and they say, "Sir, we have some potentially bad news. Do you have a picture of your wife?" And he says, "Oh, sure." And he goes and gets the picture and he hands it to the cop, and the cop looks at the picture and he says, "Well, bad news. It looks like your wife's been hit by a truck." And he says, "Well, yeah, I know she looks that way, but she's a good cook and has a great personality." So I guess he had to brace himself for some more bad news. Another cop story. As long as we're on cops, this patrolman calls into his captain, or rather his sergeant, and he says, "Sarge," he said, I'm here at a murder scene. There's a wife who shot her husband." He says, "Well, what was her motive?" "Well, she walked on his wet floor, so she shot him." He says, "Well, have you arrested her?" He says, "Oh, no, the floor's still wet." At least I think that guy's a little bit wise. Okay, and as relationships continue to go, one of the partners, eventually passes on. And in this case, it's the husband who's on his deathbed. And he says to his wife, who's a very, very practical woman, he says, honey, when I die, do you think you'll get remarried?" She says, "Well, probably. I'm, still fairly young. I think I would want a companion for the rest of my life." He says, "Oh." He says, "Well, do you think you would let him wear my wedding ring?" She says, "Well, that wedding ring isn't going to do you any good, is it? Why would I go out and buy a new wedding ring? Of course, if I got married, I'd let him use that wedding ring." She says, "Would you live in our house?" She says, "Well, I suppose we would. It's a perfectly good house. It's paid for. Why would I want to go out and start living in a new house?" He says, "One last question. Would you let him use my golf clubs?" She says, "Oh, no, he's left-handed." Apparently, she's already been planning ahead. Along that same line, the wife goes to a gypsy, and the gypsy looks in the crystal ball and says, "Oh, man," she says, I really have some bad news for you." She says, your husband's going to die a sudden and violent death." And the wife says, "Oh, one more question. Will I be acquitted?" Sounds like she's got some plans too. And another man on his deathbed, he's laying there and he's groaning and he's saying, "Oh, honey, before I go, I have something I have to confess. I have to get it off my chest." She says, now, honey, just relax, just drift off." She says, no, I have to tell you this." "Oh, no, you don't, honey." "No, I have to tell you that I had sex with your sister." She says, "Now, honey, don't worry about that. Just lay back and let the poison work." Looks like she knew how to solve her problem. Now, I have one more story about me and my wife, and for this, obviously because I'm still here, I did not die, but as you can imagine, I came close to death following what I had to say. My wife, who's very lovely, is standing in our bedroom where we have a full-length mirror, I'm already laying in bed, and she's standing there, and she's kind of turning in the mirror, and she's saying, ooh, she says, you know, for my age, I think I still have a pretty good body. But, you know, I'm thinking about having a breast enlargement surgery. And my reaction was, breast enlargement? How the hell much is that going to cost? She said, oh, maybe $5,000. $5,000? Are you crazy? She says, well, I've got my own money. You know, I have a very responsible job as well. I've got money in the bank. I'll pay for it. I said, well, instead of spending $5,000, why don't you just take some toilet paper and rub up there between your breasts? She says, that's crazy. What kind of silly idea is that? I said, well, it seems like it sure as hell worked on your butt. And like I say, I am still alive to talk about this, but it was a very, very close call. Anyway, relationships. That's my stories on relationships. I appreciate you stopping by and seeing Ralph's Sorta True stories. And before you go, get down there on the bottom if you haven't already and click that thumbs up and that subscribe button, and to the right of that, the little bell, so that we can notify you when we load some more stories on Ralph's Sorta True stories. Thanks for watching.